Hi and welcome back to Ingrid's Kitchen. Today I will be showing you some of the kitchen tool essentials. So to begin with, we have to imagine that we are following a recipe. And the first thing that we do with a recipe is we measure ingredients. So the best way to do that is with measuring spoons, measuring cups and scales. This is a tablespoon and this is a teaspoon. They are the most commonly used measuring spoons. There is also a dessert spoon which is in between them, and then you have half a teaspoon, quarter of a teaspoon, etc, etc. Something to keep in mind is a New Zealand tablespoon is 15 mils, whereas an Australian tablespoon is 20 mils. So different countries will have different measurements for some of their measuring spoons and measuring cups, as well as metric systems, etc. We also have measuring cups. This is a plastic cup and this is a Pyrex cup. The Pyrex cup has cups as well as mils and a pouring spout. It can be used for dry ingredients as well as wet ingredients, but it is better to be used for wet ingredients like liquids, as it has a pouring spout which makes it easier to pour. This plastic cup, for instance, would be better for dry ingredients, however it can still be used for liquid ingredients. It is best for dry ingredients because it doesn't have the excess top that the Pyrex does, so you can level off your dry ingredients, and it makes it easier to just go with your dry ingredients rather than trying to pour the liquid ingredients. Now we also have scales. Scales can be used for measuring things straight into a bowl or butter, or anything that needs to be measured by weight. So if you are measuring with a bowl, you will turn your scales on, you will put your bowl down, and you will press tare or 0 or whatever your setting on your scale is, and that will return the weight back to 0 so that you can measure only your ingredients and you don't have to worry about measuring your bowl as well. Then something that we would have to do is chop ingredients. So this is a chef's knife. You can see that it's got a flat rounded blade, very sharp. It can come in many sizes. It can be small or large like this one. They are good for chopping meat and vegetables. This is a serrated knife, also known as a bread knife. You can see the ragged edge. This distributes the slicing force differently to a chef's knife. That's why it's used for bread. It can also be helpful to chop tomatoes with, because tomatoes are quite soft, and so the distributed cutting force can be helpful for slicing tomatoes than a chef's knife. Now we also have measuring spoons because we will have to mix our ingredients. Mixing spoons because we will have to mix our ingredients. So we've got wooden spoons and plastic spoons. Either are fine. I prefer wood because they can be used for all ingredients, whereas plastic have the risk of melting, and that's not good. However, that doesn't mean you can't use them. They can still be very helpful. Now we also may need to use spatulas to scrape down the sides of the bowls. So this is just your classic little spatula, and you can scrape down the bowls. This is an icing spatula, or some people call it a palette knife. It's predominantly used for flattening things, smoothing things, and scraping things. Now, we have lots of different baking trays and pots and stuff, but it's also important to know what we should be lining them with. You can spray things to be crispy or oily. However, if you don't want an oily dish, it can be helpful to use either tin foil or baking paper. Tinfoil is predominantly used for savoury dishes as it helps get that crisp and keeps meats and stuff like that warm. Whereas baking paper can be used for baked dishes, so lining cake tins and trays. It can also be good for making things crispy, and it's also good for avoiding greasy meals. So, if we were to bake a cake, I would prefer to use a spring-formed cake tin, as this little lever here allows the bottom to come out, which allows for easier access to the cake. Whereas a non-spring-formed tin, you would have to loosen the cake around the edges and then try to tip it out upside down. And that's not always safe for the cake. You could end up with a mess. We've also got a brownie tray. This is helpful for brownies, of course, but you can use it for any other things. But you can spray it or you can line it, and it helps you get that nice brownie shape. Something that's also helpful is a dish. This baking dish is also Pyrex. It can be used for savoury or sweet. Something that this could be used for is a lasagna. There are also many different sizes of these. You can have big ones, little ones, and they're also great for storage if they come with lids. We also have the classic baking tray. With this, if you want something to be super crispy on the bottom, you would spray with the oil first and then put the baking paper down, and that will allow for some of the hot oil to create a crispy bottom without getting greasy food. Baking trays can be used for savoury or sweet, cookies or roasting vegetables. So they're very versatile and are very handy to have in the kitchen. Then you also have something like your muffin tray. This doesn't have to just be used for muffins. You can also put like cinnamon scrolls in, or even savoury items. Now, if we were to be cooking a meal rather than doing baking, we would want to have pots and pans. Now, this is a small pot with a lid. It is predominantly used for smaller portions. You can cook pasta, boiled eggs, and it has a lid, which is helpful. It is often useful to have lids on your pots and pans, as it can help things come to the boil faster, and it helps stop spillages and drips and mess. So this is a smaller pan. It is helpful for smaller meals and little things. Then you may also want to have a larger pot. This one also has a lid. This one can be used for vegetables, soups, larger batches of pasta, and other things. Now, if we were to be cooking meat, we would use a saucepan. This one also has a lid, because if we were to let it simmer, if a recipe calls for something to simmer, you can put the lid back on, and the steam and the heat will get trapped inside the lid and help keep the sauce or whatever you're simmering stay warm and moist, and stops it from getting dry. Whereas if something asks you to stir frequently, you can take the lid off, and then you have access to the meat to stir or whatever you're stirring in your saucepan. So having lids is very helpful. Okay, I think that was all of our kitchen basics for today. If you have anything else you would like to know, please pop your questions down in the comments, and I'll be happy to help you out. I hope that you found this informative and that you learned something. And please just keep in mind that different countries use different metric systems, so when you are following a recipe, make sure you are using accurate measurements and double checking any changes that you might need to make. So thank you for watching Ingrid's Kitchen. Please leave a like and a comment. Thank you!